Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Cleveland Clinic, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Bob Littman, President of the City Club's Board of Directors, and I am pleased to introduce today's forum, a panel discussion on the future of public higher education in Ohio. Today, the challenges facing institutions of higher education are mounting. Arguably, the one we hear about most often is cost. Public colleges and universities are facing increased criticism over decreased state and federal funding, ballooning tuitions, and increased student debt. In addition, as many college graduates find themselves underemployed, others are choosing to forego college altogether, opting instead for vocational training or certificate programs that often lead to jobs with good wages and without the burden of hefty student loans. As a result, enrollments and public support for college degrees are beginning to become a challenge for our universities. Beyond cost and employment, it can be argued that the very core of the philosophy of higher education is under threat. Institutions of higher education have historically been valued as places where divergent ideas can be discussed and argued, resulting in graduates who are knowledgeable, thoughtful, and can think critically about the problems facing society. Recently, we've seen an increase from both the right and the left to restrict speech, and in certain cases, individual speakers on college campuses, a practice many find alarming. So given all these challenges, how are our colleges and universities responding? What does the future of public higher education look like? Today, we've assembled an impressive group of local college and university presidents to offer their perspective. Joining us today, Dr. Ronald M. Berkman, President of Cleveland State University. He was unanimously selected as the 6th president of KSU by the Board of Directors in CSU. What did I say? KSU, I apologize. CSU. For his vision transforming CSU into a best-in-class urban research university, and has been marked by forward thinking and forward momentum in pursuit of engaged learning. The philosophy that embodies KSU's dedication to assemble contemporary and hands-on higher education. Dr. Alex Johnson, president of Cuyahoga Community College. Since becoming president in July 2013, he has promoted access, equity, success, and completion for the nearly 60,000 credit and non-credit students who attend Tri-C's 4 campuses and other locations throughout Northeast Ohio. And finally, Matthew Wilson, president of the University of Akron, my alma mater and hometown. After having served as interim president for about 3 months, Mr. Wilson was named the 17th president by unanimous vote of the UA Board of Trustees in October 2016. As president, he has consistently placed students first while emphasizing academic quality, innovation, research, globalization, entrepreneurship, flexibility in programming, and affordability. And finally, leading our discussion today, WKYC President and General Manager, Mickey Burns. Ms. Burns, I now turn the forum over to you.
Thank you. Woo! Nice job. All right, good afternoon, everyone. You know, I asked Dan, he called and said, I want you to do this panel. I'm like, you're putting a lowly BA broadcaster on a panel with 3 college presidents? Are you out of your mind? He went, no, have fun. Well, we started off with a lot of fun. And so all those questions we prepped earlier, yeah, forget those. We're going to go in a whole different way. And I've got a clock on all of us because I'm like, 3 college presidents. I'm not going to get a word in edgewise. So we're going to try to keep it on time. So first, thank you to our friends at NOCHI, the Northeast Ohio Council on Higher Ed. They gave me a few stats to set the stage. There are 250,000 students in 62 institutions in 23 counties here in Northeast Ohio. And while degree production and transfers from 2-year to 4-year schools are up, as Dr. Berkman told me a couple of weeks ago, there's never been a more challenging time for higher education. So we're going to talk about access, we're going to talk about affordability, we're going to talk a little bit about campus culture, and perhaps most top of mind these days, career guidance. Dr. Johnson, I'm going to start with you. Okay, full disclosure, I'm on Alex's foundation board and I love him. Yes. So I'm going to give him a really easy question to start. All right, tell us one, we all know Tri-C. Tell us one thing that might surprise us.
Oh, well, that's easy. In fact, I prepared for that question.
I told him ahead of time.
After all, she is on my foundation board. We had a call last week. But in all seriousness, Tri-C is noted for excellence in workforce development and applications of technology to teaching and a whole host of different things that really contribute to students developing competencies and skills. Sometimes what we overlook at Tri-C and community colleges generally is that they really do an outstanding job preparing individuals for transition to four-year institutions. In order to do that in a successful way, they need to emphasize liberal learning and the humanities. And as I indicated, often that's overlooked at two-year institutions. But we celebrate that and we give it a great consideration at our institution to the extent that over the last couple of decades, we've had 4 faculty members who have been CASE Professors of the Year. CASE is the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. And that organization is dedicated to excellence in teaching and learning. And while they're focused principally on four-year institutions, they do have programs for two-year institutions as well. So those 4 faculty members represent us proudly. They include Mark Lewine, a distinguished professor in anthropology, Dr. Dorothy Salem, one of our noted professors in history, Dr. Ormond Braithwaite, who has made an extraordinary reputation as a scientist, and before them we had Dr. James Banks, who a historian and who specializes in Veterans Affairs and heads up our Crowell Center. So, Mickey, that's one of the important things I wanted our audience to truly understand about Tri-C and community colleges generally.
Thank you, Alex. Speaking of surprises, when I was talking to President Wilson, he told me he at one point had studied meteorology. And I said, oh my God, Betsy Kling is on vacation for like 2 weeks. Can you please come and help? So if you see him on the air, you'll know why. But he also talked a lot about debt, college debt, and the whole view of value and ROI. So would you mind elaborating a bit on that?
Sure. The meteorology part?
Or you're welcome.
Well, let me just briefly start in response to that question with the meteorology part. You know, one of the things in higher education today that I think really is heavily discounted, and this is part of the ROI, is the breadth of education that we offer to our students. And during my freshman year of college, I was required to take science classes. Hadn't done very well in AP Physics, at least on the physics exam, and so I figured that meteorology might be a great escape. Now, I learned quite a bit in the world of meteorology. It was an escape. It was much more difficult than I had thought. But the thing that was really interesting was, fast forward, I'm in Japan looking for a job several years later, and lo and behold, there was a job that was available with a hydrological and meteorological instruments manufacturer, as they were looking for somebody to do international marketing and technical translation. And I bet that I was the only one in the pool who had any knowledge about meteorology from an academic standpoint, which opened the door for me to get in. Now, you might ask, what have I done professionally? I'm an international lawyer by trade. And I think that's one of the great things in terms of the return on investment is you're educated to go out not knowing what jobs might come, how the workforce might evolve, and you're equipped with these tools that I think help to go out and succeed. And so as we talk about return on investment, I think that's the first point. Now the second point is as you look at higher ed in Ohio today, on average, average student comes out with about $30,000 in debt at a 4-year institution. And we're being criticized, I think, by the amount of debt that students are graduating with. And I'm very sensitive to that. You know, personally, I paid for my entire education, didn't get any scholarships along the way, and it's very difficult to pay back debt. But when you think about particularly a 4-year degree as it compares with a high school education, surveys and research shows consistently that a 4-year college degree is worth $1 million more in someone's lifetime than just a high school degree. In addition to that, the length that a college graduate lives is 7 years longer than a high school graduate. And these have all been recently confirmed by some research that was conducted by Georgetown University as well. And at the end of the day, if you think that your return on investment, that you would earn $1 million during your lifetime that you otherwise would not have earned just graduating from high school, and you think about $30,000, which is really the equivalent of a new car, wouldn't you buy that car?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would. Yes, I would. Makes me want to redo my whole thing with, never mind. So, Dr. Berkman, you and I talked briefly about the challenges are over and above funding and affordability and access, but there's like a sea change of what's going on in terms of politics and the view of higher education and its value. Can you give us a little bit more information on that?
So I just said to Mickey that while I didn't have the data with me, I would wager that higher ed is caught in a institutional maelstrom of that many other institutions are suffering. If you looked at the credibility that individuals give to the U.S. House of Representatives, to the Congress, to the presidency, to the media, to all of the real pillar institutions that make up the American democracy, I would argue that, you know, while there clearly are particulars about points of view about higher education, that we are suffering and in the middle of a significant institutional crisis that is nationwide, all right? And, you know, we saw a couple weeks ago the Gallup poll that we talked about the number of Republicans who didn't feel that higher education was a value added. Just happened today, I couldn't make it happen, okay, that an article came out about 2 new polls that tried to look at this in a more granular fashion. And the real distinction, it's really interesting looking at, but the real distinction that I want to point out, okay, so it started by first looking at Democrats with a 4-year degree, Democrats without a 4-year degree, Republicans with a 4-year degree, etc. And pretty much along the spectrum, okay, of opinion about what they feel are the issues or the problems in higher education, there's a symmetry until you get to the question, okay, do you believe that higher ed pushes students to a particular political point of view? There, 2% of the Democrats agreed that higher education pushes students to a particular point of view, and 46% of the Republicans agreed that higher education pushes individuals who don't. Now, again, and I'll just say that, you know, whether this data is compelling, okay, I say the following, that higher education needs to protect its franchise as a place of free speech. And faculty need to leave their personal point of views when they enter the classroom. And that's the training they should receive, and that's the way that they're best going to equip their students. So I think that's the franchise we need to continue to fight for.
Very well said. Alex, you had mentioned that there's a goal of, like, there's 38% graduate rate currently, and the goal of 68% by 2025.
Oh, yeah, that's the governor's efforts. He would like to have by 2025, 65% of the state's population with college degrees and, I guess, certificates. Unfortunately, that rate now is 38%.
38%,
It's
right.
among the lowest in the nation, as you would imagine. But not only do we have a state issue, we have a national issue. Ron and Matthew will tell you that among the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, once where we ranked number 1, we now rank number 14. And these are the developed nations in the world.
Right.
Unless we engage individuals in educational excellence at the school level and then ultimately college, then we're going to lose our competitive edge as a country. As a result of that, President Obama back in 2009 implemented an effort designed to increase graduates by 50% by 2020, and I think 65% by 2025. Colleges and universities are making strides in that regard, but one of the things we need to be cautious of is ensuring that we continue to provide access to individuals. No longer do we have an abundance of high school graduates coming to our institution. 75% of those that will be enrolling in higher education are non-traditional populations. They are adult learners, they are veterans, they are individuals who are completing their GEDs and want to complete an education, higher education. And we have to make sure that we open doors for these individuals. In order to do that, we need to work more closely with organizations, and we need to make certain that we have intentional and mandatory pathways at our institutions to ensure their success. And back to Ron's point, I think that goes hand in hand with this focus on ensuring that individuals get a well-rounded educational experience and that we continue to be places where individuals can engage in civic dialogue or civil dialogue to promote community excellence as well.
Cool. President Wilson, there seems to be a push for more transparency and accountability in terms of performance and graduation rates and workforce development and being ready for the jobs of now. You and I talked a little bit about, do we really know where the jobs are going 10 years from now, 5 years from now? But there's a, believe it or not, a College Transparency Act of 2017 that is buried in committee, I think, at the moment. But is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? That kind of increased transparency and accountability for a school?
Yes, I mean, in terms of transparency and accountability, you know, I believe that it's good to equip folks with the facts, and you know, part of that's my legal training, I'm sure. But you know, as people understand the facts, I truly think that they'll understand what the value proposition is and what the return on investment is. It's really interesting, you know, today where it seems like higher education and its value is being questioned. One of the theories that I have is the economy is good, that people have jobs. But what you notice is in a downturn, the people that will be immediately, well, I guess they're quicker to become unemployed are those that are lesser educated. And in those times, people flock back to higher education, understanding exactly what that value is. And as you put those facts forward in terms of you know, how much you're spending, what the return on investment is, and you know, what a college degree can do for you, I think that it is a good thing to do as well. Now, the transparency, you talk about what exactly are you putting on the table, right? There are a lot of things that are out there in terms of how colleges expend monies that they receive either through tuition, fees, you know, and state support. And you know, I think there's a misconception out there that universities are wasteful and that money is just, you know, it's being spent on lavish salaries, on private jets and the things and the like. And there may be universities that do that, but I think that's in the minority, particularly as we talk about public institutions. Speaking for the University of Akron, you know, we're probably as streamlined as you can become. One of the challenges that we see, though, is it seems like, you know, every piece of legislation that comes out has another mandate, you know, has another requirement that we need to go and meet, develop a report, do something along those lines, and then it becomes, all right, you're already strapped trying to focus on the students, providing them with a quality education. How do you pay for that? Who does it? That's probably one of the biggest frustrations that we have with each piece of legislation, whether it's federal or whether it's state, that comes out requiring us to do even more.
That's a good point. There was a report that came out from the U.S. Department of Education, Dr. Berkman, that said that a regular high school student over 4 years has exactly 38 minutes of career guidance. Now, I don't know about you, but my kid didn't have a friggin' clue what he wanted to do when he went into school. I probably shouldn't say that, I'm being taped. We need the audio tape.
There's a 3-second delay.
3-second delay, good.
Not enough.
Not now, at least.
So, I mean, how do you address that? I know it can be addressed in many, many ways, but you're getting these kids who don't have any idea of what they want to do.
I think it's true that many of them either don't have an idea or they have the wrong idea. They want to be a doctor, but they didn't realize they had to take biology, okay, and chemistry to be a doctor.
Right.
So, and it's a long sociological chain. I mean, there are obviously some kids who come through professional families who have a greater vista and understand what a career is and what it means. And then there are first generation students. And 45% of our students at KSU, okay. I didn't believe in Adam Smith's invisible hand until today. 45% of our students are the first in their generation, the first in their family to go to college. And they're less equipped. They're really less equipped to understand, okay, what particular careers involve, what the trajectories are, etc. So I think we do, as a responsibility, have to build it in, and build it into the early part of a student's education, because as we know, if they track off into something and the way the systems are rigidly structured, if they then decide to make a change, they have to pay a big dividend to make that change in time and dollars, all right? So I think, you know, from the day they walk in for their orientation, we ought to be talking to them, okay, about careers. But there is also, as Alex mentioned, okay, a broader brushstroke, and that is that, you know, the same studies talk about people changing careers 5 or 6 times, all right, in the next 30 to 40 years. What's going to equip them to do that is really a solid foundation in critical thinking, liberal arts and sciences, communication skills, etc.
I still want to redo my son's education, but we'll talk about that later, gentlemen. Alex, there's a study, obviously I did my research, aren't you impressed? There's a study that talks about 30% of associate grads are making more money than bachelor degree grads. That was Nochi's stat. Thank you very much, Holly. What is Tri-C? There seems to be a moment in time here for community colleges, right, that people are understanding the value proposition more so than perhaps before. Right. What are you doing to take advantage of that?
Well, with respect to your point, that 30% is represented by individuals who primarily have associate degrees in technical fields. Information technology, for example, healthcare to a great extent. Manufacturing is a big one, and Jack Schron, who is here today, can attest to that. So there is a group of community college graduates who make more than the typical baccalaureate degree, but that's the BA. The Bachelor of Arts. It's not the Bachelor's of Science. In fact, when students complete the AA degree, our goal is to help them pursue a baccalaureate degree ultimately. And we have some great programs that run in particular in order to do that. But what we have to do is create seamless ways in which students can complete their education within these particular areas. What we've got to do is narrow choices. So we've gone from 140 degree programs to how many? 9 programs? 9 programs, and those are all substantiated by what we call centers of excellence. So those areas that I talked about earlier, they're centers of excellence where students can develop competencies and skills, earn certificates, and complete degrees, and in some instances, even complete the baccalaureate degree at the same time. And the BSN program that we have with UH and Ron is a perfect example of that. So I believe very, very strongly that in order for community college students to succeed, community college leaders have to be aware of where the job opportunities are, worked with organizations like Magnet and with companies like Jax, and then make certain that those students have what's necessary to get those jobs, and that's an important responsibility that we have. We don't have enough workforce intermediaries. The one that is most specific in that regard is Magnet, and we just need to have more of those within our community.
Cool. Let me circle back with you, and then I've got a final question for you, sir. Last year's fall class, again, according to our friends at NOCHI, was 42% male, 58% female freshman class coming in. There's a book called The End of Men, which I'm sure was a bestseller, which suggests that one of the reasons could be that as women go into more traditionally male fields across the board, men are not, in the reverse of that, going into traditionally female fields, nursing, teaching, whatever. As we look at this ginormous nursing shortage that's about to hit us, are you guys addressing that? How are you dealing with that?
So, and really with the partnership of Alex and talking about creating a full continuum with the partnership of Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals and Metro Health, I really think that around nursing, okay, we've created an incredible ecosystem. And if we could do that around more professions, okay, which get students, to capture students and bring them along a pipeline and give them the opportunity to have applied experiences early in their educational career, okay, I think that we would be more successful in aligning education and career. In terms of what's happening to men, I don't know, it doesn't seem. But you know, nursing is one of the fields where we are seeing an uptick, okay, in men. And we're really seeing at CSU, we have about 650 veterans at CSU. About 75 of them were medics or corpsmen, okay, when they were in the service, who are moving into nursing and are moving into nursing with advanced placement. You know, again, it goes back to your previous question, and that is really, you know, this alignment between aspiration and preparation.
That's a good point. Finally, Matt, higher education is a big business. I mean, it has a huge economic impact to this region. I think salaries alone were like $1.8 billion. But I don't think some people understand, not only is it teachers and all the pieces and parts of that, but the research, specifically a lot of the research that's happening at UA, is an amazing job creator and job driver. Could you address that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think that's one of the, thanks. You know, as you talk about the impact of research, you know, as higher education is looking at how to fund its activities, and you know, as you've got legislators, and you've got the state and federal government that are looking at whether to invest in higher ed, consistently as you go to those cities that have been successful, you've got the academic institutions that have research that is spinning out of those that really is not only taking those regions to a different level, but they're increasing our competitiveness as a nation across the globe. And you look at the problems that crop up and, you know, the things that can be addressed. You know, it's amazing to see even at the University of Akron, you know, what's coming out. We talk about one of the major challenges in the region being opioid abuse and addiction. So one of our researchers, Dr. Matthew Becker, just received a $2 million grant from the state of Ohio for a polymer mesh that he's developing that is inserted during surgery that indicators show will cut down on the amount of pain that someone is feeling as a result of surgery. And so as a result of that, the amount of drugs that you need to use afterwards comes down.
Wow.
And these are things that, you know, if we don't have the funding in our institutions, then you'll never get to those solutions, and folks will, you know, continue to scratch their heads. I look at some of our cutting edge research that we're doing in the world of biomimicry, and folks oftentimes don't understand what, you know, biomimicry is, but it's the study of, you know, plants and humans, and being able to take and nature and being able to take that and replicate that for the benefit of humans. So for instance, a tarantula has coloring that's not based on pigments. It's based on a completely different, its natural characteristics. And so we're working to replicate the coloring of a tarantula and then working with local institutions like Sherwin-Williams to potentially create a paint that wouldn't fade because it's not based on pigments. Or one of the big things that we talk about is the world of concussions, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's on the football field. And so we've been studying hedgehogs because I didn't realize that hedgehogs climb trees. They're not very good tree climbers. And so they get about 25 feet up and they fall and then they bounce and they just get up and they walk away. And so our researchers have replicated what goes on with hedgehogs, and they've started to place that inside of helmets to absorb the shock that the brain might encounter when it has impact. And so those are just a couple of really small examples. I could go on for a couple of hours just talking about what it is, but each one of these discoveries not only helps humankind, not only advances us regionally as a state, nationwide, but it really truly does impact us all the way around, and it spins off jobs. Companies are created. You've got entrepreneurs that will take that research and be able to run with it. And as we talk about preparing ourselves for the future and for a marketplace that continues to evolve, we certainly cannot dismiss the importance of research. And I truly think that if we're going to invest, that's where we need to invest.
Sounds good. Well, I think we're ready for audience questions, are we not? All right. KYC.
Today we are enjoying a Friday forum on the future of public higher education in Ohio, featuring Dr. Ronald M. Berkman, president of Cleveland State University.
Yay!
We'll take no chances, Dr. Berkman. Dr. Alex Johnson, president of Cuyahoga Community College, and Mr. Matthew Wilson, president and professor of law at the University of Akron. Our moderator is WKYC President and General Manager Mickey Burns.
Thank you.
And we're about to begin the audience Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, and those of you who are joining us via our radio broadcast or webcast. If you'd like to tweet a question, please tweet it at the City Club, and our staff will try to work it into the program. May we have our first question?
Here we go.
Good afternoon. Very interesting. And my question is to Dr. Berkman because he's president of my alma mater. Specifically, I graduated from Cleveland Marshall College of Law. You mentioned very briefly the importance of critical skills and a liberal arts education when so many students today may be facing 5, 6 jobs in the future. Do you have any concerns about whether a liberal arts education is being sufficiently respected and sufficiently funded these days with all of this talk about, it seems like you go to college and get a job, and that seems to be all the talk I ever hear when I read about education?
I do have concerns because I think we're in some ways losing the equilibrium between those two factors. I mean, whatever your job skills are, if you walk into a job interview, right, you're going to be judged on how you communicate, on your interpersonal skills, how you hear and you answer questions. And those are the skills that are really foundational in the liberal arts and sciences curriculum. So from the day I came to Cleveland State, I said that I find nothing at all antithetical. In fact, I find it complementary that we continue to focus on a strong foundation in liberal arts and sciences while preparing students with a set of more specific skills that will help them be successful, not instead of preparing students with a set of skills that will help them to be successful. And I think increasingly when you talk to leaders in corporate America, they are now echoing that message, okay? What we want as a workforce, all right, are young people who have these sets of critical skills, who are communicators, who are analytic, who can look at a bigger picture, who can color outside the lines.
And if you don't mind me just jumping in
Go.
As well, as I look at the value of a liberal arts education as well, I mean, there are certain things that are striking in addition to what Ron mentioned. One is I don't think we can discount the importance of history. You know, as we face different challenges as a society, if we're subtracting history from the education that we're providing to future leaders and members of society, they're going to be at a loss as those challenges come. We're not going to be able to lose from our mistakes. You know, as you talk about, what is fact and what is not, I truly believe that in our classrooms, we're teaching students to analyze what is fact and what is fiction, and being able to bury down into that conversation and discover exactly what it is. And as our society changes, we're not going to know what jobs are going to be out there. If you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be hiring a social media specialist, I would have said somebody's going to go and hold parties, right? But social media today is completely different than what we would have even envisioned. But I believe that you truly are equipped for what it is. And even in the world of law, for instance, there are so many different things that encompasses that are always evolving. And I look back to my own education, and I started off using the example of meteorology, how that impacted what I ended up going in to do. I would have never have had that opportunity if somebody would have said, okay, you need to go into this specific profession. We're only going to teach you what is needed to succeed in that profession. What happens if that profession goes away? And I think that's one of the challenges that we're facing as a society today.
I thought that Matt's hedgehog story was a great metaphor for the current college presidency. Climb up 50 feet, fall down, bounce, okay? Get back on your feet and keep going.
But they have low ACT scores when they actually...
I can get you one of those helmets if you
Thank you.
Next question. Oh, Mr. Pogue. Oh, we have one over here.
Yes, I've asked you, a couple of you this before, but could you comment on the enormous impact that international professors and international students have made on our society here?
So I'll say a few things, and then and the first is that, as again, many of you know, for generations, American higher education was revered around the world. It was absolutely the platinum standard. And the number of international students from developing and developed countries that came here, studied here, rooted here, and then became, citizens and got jobs here are really an incredibly important engine to economic development, right? And there's no doubt that we are seeing a significant interrupt, both as there are more competitors now seeking international students, also as economies build the capacity. China and India increasingly builds internal capacity, to make these. So I think that, there's been a tremendous value added, and we have to lower the entrance price for talented international students to come to America and study in America.
So one of the things that might affect the extent that we continue to promote the scientific and technological development of our country would be the absence of individuals of international origin who have come to our country and applied their talents and their skills to make us better in those capacities. I think we have an issue with our system that would not allow those individuals into our country when we have been one that has been truly open to individuals from throughout the world. That would be unfortunate. But the other thing that I think is necessary within that context is to ensure that more of our students, more of those, the next generation and beyond, are developed so that they can become the scientists and the engineers and the mathematicians that we need for the future and to build upon that generation. I hate to say this, but I think we've lost a generation of individuals in that area. And we need to return to making certain that our public school systems provide the foundation in order for those talented youth to advance. And quite honestly, they need to be challenged. No one can tell me that we don't have children in America that are not capable of meeting these particular standards. And we've got to emphasize that not only in public education, but also in our colleges and universities. I'm not suggesting that everybody take on that, but we need to have more that do.
Looking through my international lenses, I've lived overseas about 2 decades of my life. And I grew up in a household with limited means, had no interest whatsoever in anything international, and it was a volunteer missionary experience that took me to Japan that completely turned my life around, exposing me to different culture, different thoughts, different thinking, really opening my eyes up. And having come into education in 2003, I've made it all about that international experience. And it's both inbound and it's also outbound. And so at the University of Akron, one of the things that we did earlier this year was we opened an international center. And that center is designed to attract international scholars and international students to this region and to the University of Akron, making it easier for them to come, creating a welcoming environment, at the same time providing opportunities for students here in Ohio and other students at the University of Akron to enjoy that international experience. And so I'm even doing some creative things because of my belief as we sit down and we look at things from a comparative perspective, as we spend time in other cultures, or even as we do things in classroom using the technology that we have on an international scale, that minds can be open, perspectives can be broadened, and as a society we can become stronger. And so, to give you an example, for our honors college kids, I'm leading a study abroad experience to Japan during my spring break, and taking 30 students with us. I think we're probably one of the first universities in the country to be holding a class that is not only 4 universities on 4 different countries, simultaneous at the same time, but it's 4 different continents. So it's a University of Akron, a university in South Africa, a university in France, and a university in Brazil. And we'll be doing, a professor from each one of these institutions will be taking 4 weeks and be presenting a lecture that's going to be held at the same time with students from all 4 of these universities. And as we were doing the press conference about a month ago, and I was taking questions from a reporter in France and Brazil and South Africa, I was sitting here thinking, look at what we are able to do and the steps that we're able to take. And interestingly, all 4 of those countries are having presidential struggles. And so that's going to be one of the focuses of this political science class, to see if we can learn in terms of how different societies are addressing things. So very timely, very topical, very international.
Cool. Mr. Pogue has a question.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad that the 3 of you are here. My question is directed to Dr. Wilson. I really appreciate the research you've been talking about. I taught for 40 years, and one of the things that's happening now is many teachers are leaving the profession because they don't have the latest brain research dealing with toxic stress and trauma, and how trauma actually can change the architecture of the brain, making it really impossible for children to self-regulate and problem solve and retain information. So my question is, what efforts are being made to make sure that teachers are being given the tools to be able to work with our children? And the numbers increasing, not only low income, but because of the opioid crisis, more and more children are coming to school with toxic stress. What kind of research is being done, or is any being done, to help teachers in that area?
That's an exceptional question. Exactly in that area, what is being done, I don't have the details to go into that, but I can tell you that there is research that is ongoing. One of the challenges that we face, particularly as a public state-funded institution, is where do you get sufficient resources to fund that type of research? And so, we're constantly looking, to private funding, to public funding, to different research grants that are out there. It's something that I believe is important. And as we have evolved, we're able to spot those issues, hopefully go out and treat those issues, and to be able to take that further. What I'm seeing, and this is one of the great things about Northeast Ohio and what excites me about being here in the region, is the amount of resources that we have in the medical world. And that's not only treatment, but that's research. And Alex and Ron had kind of alluded to some of their programs and things that they're doing as well. But we definitely need to find additional ways to support the researchers, the academics that are looking in these areas, and in particular, the students that are attracted to this. If we can get students engaged in research on the undergraduate level, it can be transformative in their lives and in society as a whole.
I'm going to run over to you right now. Come up
You're,
here.
you're attached to the
I
wall.
know. Come up here. I know. I was going to. Can I hold it out? Okay. He's waiting so patiently.
Apart from these general societal issues that you've been discussing, I'd like to just focus on Ohio. I think we're presently 45th among the 50 states in terms of state support of public higher education. We've had a good little spurt recently, but going back many years, we've been in the bottom quartile for as long as anybody can remember. Why is that, and what can be done to turn it around?
I don't know all of the particular whys, but it's also just not Ohio, okay? 45 states, all right, over the last decade have reduced funding for public education, K through 12, all right, and higher education. And I believe in part it's devolution. I believe, you know, that as the federal government has begun to withdraw from their role, right, and more mandates are passed to the state, okay, state governments withdraw from their role, local governments increasingly withdraw from their role. It all has to do, Mr. Pogue, okay, with the fact that we have not successfully made the importance of public education a national priority, okay? And until we raise the importance of public education to the level of healthcare as a priority and a barometer for how healthy this society is going to be, we're not going to be able to marshal the political support that we need.
I tend to agree. And in Ohio, certainly there are a number of competing priorities. But to be quite honest with you, I can't think of anything more important, with the exception of maybe healthcare, than education. Because if you produce an educated citizenry, then you've got a skilled and competent workforce. You have individuals that are members of the world of ideas and the life of the mind, and those are the individuals that will be leading our communities in the future. In Ohio, we just have to make a commitment to that, and we have not to the extent that we should. So it's an important local responsibility that we have. Cleveland, I think, is stalwart in its efforts as I think about the Higher Education Compact and Say Yes to Education and to College Now. But at the state level, we have not been involved with the development and funding of higher education and public education to the extent that we should. And I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future.
I think there's a real choice. And you know, the choice comes down to you have a limited pool of resources. And as you've got the funder, whether it's federal or whether it's state governments, looking at that limited pool, what is the easiest area to cut? And if you look at the investment that's been made in education, you know, it's a large, sizable amount that's actually there. So it may be easy to just say, okay, you know, let's skim a little bit off of the top here and reallocate it or do savings here, without really looking underneath and seeing how that's impacting us as a whole. And it comes down to, and I've made this conversation to our local legislators as well. Education is delivered at a price. Who's going to pay that? You know, is it the individuals or is it going to be the government? You've got to make a choice. And you know, the criticism has been, well, tuition goes up, goes up, goes up, and funding goes down. You've got to figure out what that investment's going to be, and the value of it is going back to that return on investment. It's definitely there.
Hi. I'm curious to hear a little bit about your data as you think about matriculation through graduation, even employment rates for your students based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. And if there is a gap that you're seeing, what you see as your role in higher ed to address it, and anything that's having an impact.
So
You got 3 hours, Alex. Go ahead.
let me just share with you that the gaps at our institution and throughout this country are enormous. Equity is an important responsibility that we have not only at higher education but as a community. The skills gap, for example, is a perfect illustration of what we're contending with on a community-wide basis when you figure only 6 out of 10 individuals are prepared for current jobs, and in the core communities, it's 2 out of 10, and that's abysmal. I believe very, very strongly in order for institutions to do a better job in that regard, we've got to begin working more closely with public education and ensuring that students of color and those economically disadvantaged get a chance to raise their level of skill so that when they come to us, they're not mired in developmental education, and that they go directly into college level classes. We've done a lot in that regard, but we have a long way to go. And Maggie can tell you that in the Higher Education Compact, which measures retention and graduation rates, even though we have exceeded our goal, we still have a long way to go in that regard. Not only do we emphasize it at the institution, we emphasize it also in the community. I think the other thing that's important is that higher education cannot do it alone. Public education cannot do it alone. It takes partners. Some I mentioned already, but companies will be instrumental in that regard as well, so that we can develop more fully those individuals that take on these meaningful job opportunities and earn a living wage. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was talking to my Chief of Staff, Ronald McNair, I believe it was yesterday if I'm not mistaken, but for a family of four, a living wage is $30 an hour. You know what our average wage is here in Cuyahoga County? $19. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to get more individuals educated and into good jobs so that they can become productive citizens, both in terms of the economy and also in their communities.
So just to echo what Alex said, and that is that higher education has to take a more aggressive role in helping to develop the tools that students need while they're in K through 12, okay? So rather than cursing the darkness as they tend to do about, oh my God, the students are unprepared. Oh, when I taught they were so much better. I was so much smarter than these kids are, basically, right? Why don't they fix it, okay? So we've tried at Cleveland State to bring 2 schools onto campus. We have a international baccalaureate K through 12 school, and we have MC Square, okay, which is a STEM high school, both Cleveland Municipal School District schools. And I really believe that if we can bring these communities together, okay, in a venue, all right, and allow information and skills exchanges to go on. But maybe more importantly, I mean, so many of the kids who live in this city, the city of Cleveland, have never been to or seen a college campus in their lifetime, okay? For them to have the opportunity to be on a campus and learn on a campus and see kids that look like them walking on that campus and being on that campus, it may sound small, but I think it really is a transformative experience for them.
So just to mention, Ron talked about the several schools that he has associated with Cleveland State. We also have had for the last 15 years a program at Cuyahoga called the High Tech Academy. Those students begin coming to us in the 9th grade, and many of them complete their high school experience with an associate's degree as well. And it's important that we get them on campus. Now, one of the things that is disconcerting to me and of great concern is that recently the legislature has announced actions to reduce the College Credit Plus program so that students who normally come to us in high school that benefit from enrichment programming and courses and college pathways and what have you we'll no longer be able to experience that. And we are doing the best we can to overcome that situation. But I think what we have to do is be more faithful to our responsibility, particularly around education and training, and we have not been recently.
Right. Thank you, Alex.
So thank you. Thank you.
Today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a Friday forum on the future of public higher education in Ohio. Today's forum is the Mandel Forum on the state of higher education in America, made possible by an endowment gift from the Mandel Foundation. We appreciate their continued support and generosity. Community partners for today's forum are the Higher Education Compact and the Northeast Ohio Council on Higher Education. We also appreciate your support in promoting today's forum. Additionally, we welcome guests at tables hosted by Cleveland State University and Cuyahoga Community College. We also welcome students from Chardon High School. Student participation in the City Club forums is provided by many foundations, including the William Weiss Foundation. We thank all of you for being here today, and that brings us to the end of our forum. Thank you, Dr. Berkman. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And thank you, Ms. Burns. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Cleveland Clinic, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland Incorporated.